Hey, how's it going? It's Sam Frost here, and in this short video I'm going to explain the difference between Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics. So maybe someone's recommended to you that you use Google Tag Manager on your website, or you looking to engage a website development or agency or marketing agency or something like that, and you've been told that you need to get Google Tag Manager, or maybe you've been told you need Google Analytics as well if you don't already have it. So what's the difference between these two platforms? If you're not familiar with Google's marketing tool set, it can be quite confusing, as it sort of sounds like both of them do a similar kind of thing. So firstly, let's look at the similarities. Both of them are Google products that Google provides for the sort of benefit of marketers, specifically digital marketing. And Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager are both free. You don't have to spend any money with Google to use them. So, whether you're starting out or you've got a decent sized business and you've got, no budget or a reasonable budget, you can basically get started with Tag Manager and Google Analytics for free. Now, that's largely where the similarities end. I guess the only other similarity is both of them need to be installed on your site. So you can't use Google Analytics or Tag Manager for anything meaningful without having them installed on your site. But this is where the big difference comes in. So Google Analytics is ultimately a data collection and analysis tool. So what you do with Google Analytics is you install it on your site, and at the time of recording this, we're in this kind of awkward transition phase where the old Google Analytics system, Universal Analytics, is being sunsetted, and from the middle of 2023, you're going to have to use Google Analytics 4, which is a new system. I won't complicate this video by going into much more detail about that, but suffice it to say that you should be looking to set up Google Analytics 4 at the moment, possibly in tandem with Universal Analytics, which for most people is still a nicer platform to use. But anyway, Google Analytics is there to help you collect data on how your website is used and how your marketing campaigns are performing. So you can see things like how many people have been to your website, where they've come from, both in a geographic sense and also in a sort of channel sense, if they come from an organic Google search or directly navigating to your website or email or Facebook or whatever the case may be. You can look at your top performing content, so what pages people are looking at. You can look at even much more granular and kind of potentially valuable data like breakdowns of device types and browsers that are using your site. You can set up conversion tracking, all kinds of things like that. So Google Analytics allows you to collect data about the usage of your website, and then you can also visualize and report on that data either within Google Analytics or using separate systems like Google Data Studio or third-party reporting tools as well. Google Tag Manager, on the other hand, is actually a sort of tag deployment system. It's implied in the name. So Google Tag Manager in and of itself doesn't really collect data. What you do with Tag Manager is you install it on your website, and then you can actually use Tag Manager to deploy other tags and codes. So this is where there's some crossover with Google Analytics and people can get a bit confused. Let's say you've already got Google Analytics installed on your website. You've got a Squarespace site, for example, that a developer's created for you or you've built for yourself, and you've already got Google Analytics, and now your marketing freelancer or agency is saying, hey, you need to go and get Google Tag Manager on the site. We'll set that up for you. You might be thinking, well, I've already got Analytics. What does Tag Manager give me? Well, the whole point with Tag Manager is that you, instead of installing Analytics directly on the site, you would install Tag Manager and then install or deploy Google Analytics via Google Tag Manager. And Google Tag Manager, without overcomplicating it, and there's a lot of amazing detail you can get into with that platform, and there's some great channels like Measure School, for example, online that have really good content on how to use Tag Manager effectively. But basically, Tag Manager has two key components. It has tags and it has triggers. You install your container, which is the base code that goes in your site, and depending on how your site's built, there'll be different ways of installing that. So you might install it via a WordPress plugin or directly pasting code in. You might install it yourself, or you might have to get a developer to do it. But once Tag Manager is installed, you can create tags, which is basically deploying other types of codes on your site all through this one container. And so that could be something like Google Analytics, it could be something like a LinkedIn Insight tag or a Facebook pixel or a custom tag for a different ad platform you might be using. And then you have things called triggers. And triggers are basically conditions that have to be met in order for that tag to work. So something like Google Analytics, if you want it to work on every single page on your website, you would have a Google Analytics tag set up in Tag Manager, and then you'd have a trigger for all page views on your site. On the other hand, if you're doing something like tracking conversions, so let's say that you want to track the number of people who actually click on your click-to-call phone numbers on your website, well, with Tag Manager and Google Analytics in tandem, you can actually do this, and you can do other things like tie those phone call clicks back to LinkedIn ad click links or Facebook ads or anything like that, but that's a topic for another time. But basically what you can do is have your conversion tag, your Google Analytics conversion tag or event tag within Google Tag Manager, and then use a trigger that only fires off when someone clicks on a TEL or telephone link in order to pass the sort of criteria through for that event to fire off to then go into Google Analytics. So Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics work nicely in tandem together. You don't have to use Google Tag Manager in order to use Google Analytics. You don't have to use Google Analytics in order to use Google Tag Manager, but typically a sort of best practice would be to have Google Tag Manager installed on your site and deploy Google Analytics via Google Tag Manager if possible. This makes it easier to do more advanced tracking, like tracking certain types of form submits that can be hard to measure with Google Analytics, or tracking whether people click on things like PDFs or other files on your website, or whether people click on telephone numbers or click to email links, all those kind of things. And also if you want to deploy other tags like Google Ads, conversion tracking tags, LinkedIn Insight tag, Facebook Pixel, Hotjar tracking codes, custom HTML tags, all those kind of things, having Tag Manager makes this easy because you have one container where you do all of the work and then you deploy using your triggers the codes or the tags from there. And so it's a much cleaner system. It's faster to work with. Developers and digital marketers and marketing agencies and so on will typically have an easier time and can do better work for you using Google Tag Manager than they can using Google Analytics as a standalone without Tag Manager and having to install all kinds of other codes, which can be quite a sort of bloated, messy thing to do. If you've ever tried to install 4 or 5 different tracking codes in one go on a website, it can actually get quite hard to manage, whereas one code goes in for Tag Manager and everything is deployed through Google Tag Manager. So long story short, to recap, what is the difference between Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager? Google Analytics is there to help you collect and report on website usage data so you can track how your website's growing over time, the content people are looking at, your conversions, all those kind of things. Google Tag Manager doesn't track anything in and of itself. It's a platform that allows you to basically configure and deploy tags or codes from other platforms like Google Analytics, but there's a whole lot of other ones as well. And then you can use triggers to set specific criteria for those tags to fire off, allowing you more flexibility and power in what you're doing. And it also streamlines the tag deployment process because you can do everything through Tag Manager rather than having to go back into the website, which can save you on things like developer fees and so on. So yeah, hopefully you find that helpful. If you've got any more questions, please do let me know. You can leave a comment below. You can email me on info@samfrost.co.nz. Thank you so much for watching. Please like this video, subscribe for more digital marketing advice, and I'll see you next time.